right? Thanking God for the way that he teaches us. Pangono, pangono, a phrase that I might be mispronouncing, but from my time on the mission field, I believe it means bit by bit. Understanding that a lot of these chapters we've already been through, but even going through them again, just in a short period of time, he has added at least a little bit of insight to things I saw just a few weeks ago. Things that seem, at least for me, to be valuable, and I hope likewise they will be for you too, as we go through the final chapter of Romans chapter 16. A chapter I think I want to look at from the perspective of the title, Their Works. And as we've been saying, hopefully why will be clear by the time we get to the end of the chapter. That, once again, since we've been through it recently, I just want to borrow from the structure that I've used in a previous discussion at the risk of sounding redundant. This is a chapter where he's going to say a lot of, not greetings, he's going to say a lot of goodbyes in a lot of ways take the form of greetings, understanding that once again, Paul is hoping to actually see these people in person, and he might have already had the chance to get familiar with some of them already in his travels. But in his goodbyes at the end of the letter, he is going to have a number of categories of folks, as we have seen and discussed before. First of all, in the first two verses, he is going to describe a patron by the name of Phoebe, and instead of saying goodbye to her, he is going to commend her to them. And so she may be the one going along with those carrying this letter. Either way, he's going to describe her as one who has been a patron not only to himself, but as a patron to many as well. And likewise, offering, advising, suggesting that they greet her and welcome her with the same hospitality and kindness that she seems to have shown to others. But now from the patron, we're going to see a class of workers going from verses 3 through 16, but they're not all the same, because the first couple that he is going to introduce us to is a couple we've seen before in the book of Acts, assuming this is the same, Priscilla and Aquila. He is going to describe them as fellow workers, but as opposed to the other workers in the remaining verses, they're going to be the kind of workers who have also risked their necks for Paul, whom he gives thanks for, but not just him. He's going to say all the churches of the Gentiles give thanks for them, as well as it seems that they have also been hosts to others. Understanding that, he is then going to go through an itemized list of individuals to whom he gives greetings for, in many cases, the work they have done, but if not for the work that they have done, the unique way in which he seems to have considered them a blessing. Won't go into detail into all of the specific greetings he gives, but understand that beyond the gifts or the greetings he gives to workers and folks who have a special role in his ministry, not the least of which, one that's close to my heart, is one that he specifically greets along with his mother, because he's going to say that likewise, that man's mother has been a mother to him as well. If you know, you know, meaning if you've traveled and you had to be in ministry work and rely on that verse that says, anyone who has left house or home, mother or father for my sake will have that many times over provided for them. And so along the way, you might have been able to appreciate this greeting that Paul is giving, understanding that if you've left home for the sake of God, there are times when that's not just poetry. It's not just a promise. You have seen people take you in a way your mother might be proud of, or would have wanted somebody to take you in her absence. Anyway, a whole bunch of words for whatever reason, that one hit home to me. But going on, even beyond those who he gives a special recognition to, there are those who I've called the others, those who he is greeting just generally with an honorable mention. And why is that important? Well, because by the time you get out of the first 16 verses, he is going to, in verse 17 or verses 17 through about 20, he's going to give some not so honorable mentions to those who he's going to caution them to stay away from. We've talked about them in past lessons, but I'll read it just to be absolutely clear. Verse 17, I appeal to you, brothers, to watch out for those who cause divisions and create obstacles, contrary to the doctrine that you have been taught. Avoid them, for such persons do not serve our Lord Christ, but their own appetites. And by smooth talk and flattery, they deceive the hearts of the naive. For your obedience is known to all, so that I rejoice over you, but I want you to be wise as to what is good and innocent as to what is evil. The God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you. And the nuance that I got this time, understanding we talked about that passage in particular at least twice before, is this. Maybe, just maybe, and once again, this is me saying be a Berean again, completely dismiss this because this is pretty much pure speculation. But maybe, just maybe, all of these greetings by name that Paul is giving are not just mere courtesies. Maybe they have a role in helping protect this church from that warning. Understanding that when he is calling certain members out for causing divisions, basically causing disunity in an otherwise potentially unified circumstance, one of the things he may be doing in naming all the people who he's thankful for by name is in by leaving the others out, making sure that their names are a noticeable absence. And even though that might be a cold thing to do, and it might not be what Paul is doing here in naming a bunch of folks through the first 16 verses and then just going kind of silent and just giving a warning by about verse 17, even if that's not what Paul is doing here, it is super reminiscent to the warnings in the word that say we each have an appointment before the judgment seat of Christ or the judgment seat of God, where he is going to give us each what we have earned according to our works, thus the title. And so in this final chapter of the book of Romans, even if this is not Paul's approach, if it is, it's pretty clever. And it is rewarding those who have caused divisions according to their works, instead of being inclusive of the entire group of believers at Rome, leaving some out quite potentially in their efforts to cause division. Likewise, Paul might be turning the tables on them according to the measure that they have used. And as we've said, even if that's not Paul's approach, one day God is going to repay us all according to the measure that we have used. Understanding that it's not always for the worst, which is why one of the reasons taking Paul's words seriously have everything to do with being able to look forward with anticipation to the day that God willing, one day repays us with good things according to the measure that we have used. To God willing, do good to all, as we referenced in Galatians, to all, but especially to those who are of the household of faith. And one of the reasons why that is super important to me is as we are closing out the book of Romans, he is not closing out with that warning about the divisive element in that particular congregation. He ends it up with, like we said, the same purpose statement that he started with, calling them to understand that the gospel that he's preaching, the mystery that's being revealed and that has been made known now, has a purpose. And that is to, in verse 26, bring about the obedience of faith. And so as we close out the book of Romans, a book that talks a lot about grace, and it's probably more popular for its discussions of grace, in celebrating the grace of God that Paul spends a lot of time talking about in the book of Romans, it is so important not to lose track of the fact that God's judgment is still a very real part of not only the gospel, but the thing that Paul is trying to caution the church to understand in the book of Romans. And more importantly, he gives the purpose statement. As much as we might emphasize the words and the chapters that he devotes to grace in the book of Romans, the purpose that he gives it in the beginning in chapter 1 and at the end of chapter 16 is not simply to clarify the gospel of faith, but to clarify the way that the gospel is intended to bring about the obedience of faith, so that, God willing, we can look forward to meeting him face to face in peace.